Chapter 4. 2 Visits to the Bank. December 1878. The Kelly gang have many friends, but they have no money. So they rob the bank in the little town of Euroa. They speak nicely to the people in the town and do not fire their guns. They leave Euroa with £2,260, but they give a lot of the money to their friends, the poor farmers of the northeast, to buy food, clothes and land. The police reward goes up to £2,500. The police tried hard to catch the Kelly gang, but the outlaws had help from their friends. They were always miles away when the police came to look for them, so the police put many of their friends in prison. Ned was very angry about this. "It isn't right," he said. "Why do the police do this? Because our friends are poor farmers, not rich ones, and because they help us. We must stop the police." "But how?" said Steve. "What can we do?" "2 things," said Ned. "First, we need more money, so we must visit a bank. And second, we tell everybody in Australia about the police here in Victoria." "Rob another bank?" Dan said. "But the police are watching all the banks now." "Yes, in Victoria," said Ned, "but not in New South Wales. So we're going to a bank in Geraldary. Here's the plan. There are only 2 policemen in Geraldary. We arrive at night, go to the police station and lock the policeman in the station. Then we rob the bank and go to the office of Geraldary's newspaper." "The newspaper office?" said Dan. "Why? What for?" "To print this," said Joe. "Look, it's Ned's letter to the world. I wrote it down for him. It tells the true story about Ned and his family, about the police, about Stringybark Creek, about everything." "We want everybody to read this letter, but how do we give it to them?" Ned said. "We must print it in a newspaper. It's the only way." Ned planned the Geraldary visit very carefully. There were now more than 200 policemen in the northeast of Victoria because of the Kelly gang, and Ned asked his friend Aaron Sherritt for help. So Aaron went drinking with a policeman. Money passed from one hand to another, and Aaron spoke quietly in the policeman's ear. "Go to Corryong. The gang are planning to cross the Murray River near there very soon." So the police rode east to Corryong, and the Kelly gang rode west and crossed the river 200 kilometres away. And late on a Saturday night in February 1879, they rode into the town of Geraldary. Outside the police station, Ned began to shout, "Help! Help! There's a big fight at the hotel! We need help!" The 2 policemen ran out and saw the outlaws with their guns. The gang locked the policemen in a room in the station and took their uniforms. For the next 2 days, the gang lived in the police station. On Sunday, Joe and Steve put on the police uniforms and walked around the town. "We're the new policemen for Geraldary," they told everyone. They went past the bank and the hotel next to it and looked carefully at all the doors, front and back. Then, on Monday morning, Dan and Steve went into the hotel next to the bank and took out their guns. They took all the hotel workers into one room. "Don't move," said Dan. "You're our hostages, but don't be afraid. We don't want to shoot anybody." Ned and Joe went into the bank through the back door. When they came back to the hotel, they had more hostages, 2 bank workers and all the people from the bank. And Ned had the bank's money, £2,140. There were now about 60 hostages in the room, and Ned began to speak to them. "What's happening in this country? Do you know? No, you don't. So listen. Poor men get poorer, and rich men get richer. The police help the rich farmers and put the poor farmers in prison. Why? For nothing. Do you call this justice? There is no justice in Australia. The police say we are killers, but I say the police are killers. I'm going to tell you about Stringybark Creek, the true story, not the police story." Ned began to read to the hostages from his letter. It was a long letter, 56 pages and more than 75,000 words. After a few pages, he stopped. "Where's the newspaper office in this town?" he said. "I want to print this letter, then everybody can read it." Edwin Living, one of the bank workers, answered. "Mr. Gill is the editor of the newspaper," he said. "I know his house. I can take you there." "Come on then," Ned said. But Mr. Gill was not at home. He was at a farm 10 kilometres away. When he heard the Kelly gang were in town, he ran away, because he was afraid of them. At the house, Mrs. Gill opened the door. "Where's your husband?" Ned asked. I don't know. He's away," Mrs. Gill said. Ned looked at her angrily and took out his letter. "I want him to print this in his newspaper," he said. "Give it to me," said Edwin Living. "I can give it to Mr. Gill when he gets back." "He must print it," said Ned. "It's about my life, and I want the world to read it." "Yes," said Edwin. "Everybody must read it, and Mr. Gill's going to print it, for sure, Mr. Kelly." "He must," Ned said. "All right, you give it to him, but do it, or the next time I come to Gerald Derry." They went back to the hotel, and Ned had a drink with the hostages. Then the 4 outlaws rode out of town, back to the Murray River, and across into Victoria and the hills in the northeast. The police looked everywhere. They made the reward £8,000, but nobody came to get it. Nobody wanted to help them. In Gerald Derry, people laughed about the visit of the Kelly gang. In April, Ned's friends came out of prison and went back to their farms, and for 16 months the police heard nothing of the Kelly gang. And Ned's letter? The famous Geraldary letter? Edwin Living did not give it to Mr. Gill. He went down to Melbourne and gave it to the police. Nobody saw the letter again for 50 years.